It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all for the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history, from Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation.
From the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, it's Unraveling Revelation. Welcome, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and we're so delighted to have you in our home once again. And soon you're going to be in the barn, and we'll tell you more about that after the break. We're still wearing a red, white, and blue because it's the month of July, and we will tell you about that and the deal from our store in the break. So
Yes.
be sure to watch for that.
Well, boy, this is exciting stuff and really deep stuff. We may wind up having to go another week yet.
I think we probably will.
Yeah. Isaiah 14 is one of the most remarkable chapters in the Bible, and as we went through in our previous studies, which you can find in our archives, in our app, which is one of the bonus benefits of downloading our app.
Oh, that and the wonderful conversations in the app, so you can
Yes.
actually talk about this program with the rest of the viewers.
That's right. The new messaging feature we have installed in the app. It's always been there. We just didn't realize we could make use of it. The developers at Subsplash have done an amazing job for us. Not only do you get all of our content, you can watch the video. If you need to keep your eyes on the road, if you're listening while you're driving, you can hit the audio only function. But you can also...
what are you doing driving with us, while talking to you?
Go to the messaging function. You can discuss the programs and especially make use of the prayer request section.
Please do.
We've got people all over the world who are making use of that's really become the most active section of the messaging.
I love that.
On the app.
I so
praying
love that.
for one another.
There's also an announcements section.
Right, so we can let you know what's going on. We've shared some pictures of the Build Barn Better project that we'll talk about after the break. So download the app, available for iOS, Android, Amazon Kindle Fire phones and tablets. There's also a Roku version. If you want to throw us directly onto your TV, you can do that. And we
Throwing
thank you.
us onto their TV.
Oh,
Ooh.
yeah. Our faces in full HD. Well, this section of Isaiah chapter 14, Isaiah, the whole book is just incredible. I mean, there are scholars who devote their entire life to studying Isaiah, and I can see why.
Yes.
There's just so much here in Isaiah 14. In fact, just before we began recording today, I said, hey, I just saw something in verse 17 I'd never noticed before. And
Has it always been in there?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, but we just weren't observant enough. The connections in Isaiah 14, I think, cement the connection between Babylon and Assyria, or rather Babel, the gate of God, Babel, and Assur, who was the Assyrian version of Enlil.
Mm-hmm.
Canaanites called him El. The Hebrews called him Molech. But I think originally he was called Shemiyaza, the leader of this rebellion of the sons of God described in Genesis chapter 6. And at the end, Revelation 9, he will be called the destroyer, Abaddon or Apollyon. And the clue there is the fact that the place where Solomon built the high place for Molech, the Mount of Olives, was called the Har HaMashkith, Mount of the Destroyer.
Right. Exactly.
So Isaiah 14, beginning at verse 3, the section from verse 3 through verse 23 is devoted to condemning the king of Babylon, or the melek babel, the king of the God gate. But in the middle of that, in verse 12, he addresses this entity as how you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, or O day star, son of the morning, son of the dawn. That in Hebrew is Helen ben Shachar, and Helen is a Semitic form of the name Enlil. So we're dealing with this entity, Enlil / Assur. So that whole section that includes the prophecy against Assyria is connected. I will break the Assyrian, except the word the is not in the Hebrew. I will break Assur in my land. I think this is a prophecy, future fulfillment of God destroying this entity which suggests that when he gets out in Revelation 9, that this final battle takes place in Israel,
Oh,
which
I think
is where
so.
Armageddon, the Har Moed, Mount of Assembly, is located. That's the Temple Mount,
I
Zion.
think so. Could you do me a favor, and especially for all of you viewers who this is new to you, can you back up and just read the chapter?
Sure.
Just read it down to there so we get context.
Yeah. We'll start in beginning of the chapter. For Yahweh will have compassion on Jacob and will again choose Israel and will set them in their own land. And sojourners will join them and will attach themselves to the house of Jacob. And the peoples will take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them in Yahweh's land as male and female slaves. They will take captive those who were their captors and rule over those who oppressed them. Now, verse 3, this is where we begin the section.
Well, let me just stop for a minute because this description would never be allowed by the West.
True. Yeah, it's the word slave in the ancient world had a different connotation than what it has.
Well, it's not
the
even the
modern world.
slave idea. It's the idea that Israel gets to make its own choices.
Well, true. Yeah. Verse 3, when Yahweh has given you rest from your pain and turmoil and the hard service with which you were made to serve. And I remember that when Isaiah was writing, Judah was still an independent kingdom.
Yes.
It
So
was
this
not,
they had to go, what do you mean?
they had not yet been carried off to Babylon. This was probably within 50 to 75 years of Nebuchadnezzar.
Which I think means that this is an end times prophecy.
Right. Yep. You will take up the hard service with which you were made to serve. You will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. And as we mentioned last week, that's melek babel, which can mean king of Babylon, can also mean king of the God gate.
Yes.
And Babylon being a name applied to other cities, including ancient Nineveh. How the oppressor has ceased, the insolent fury ceased. Yahweh has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of rulers that struck down the peoples in wrath with unceasing blows, that ruled the nations in anger with unrelenting persecution.
Okay, verse 6 in the Septuagint, having smitten a nation in wrath with an incurable plague, smiting a nation with a wrathful plague, which spared them not, he rested in quiet. And the earth cries aloud with joy.
Yeah, verse 7, the whole earth is at rest and quiet.
Yes.
So slightly different.
Slightly different.
Because that part about being at rest and quiet is in verse 6 in the Septuagint. Here it's
it broke it up in the way they did it here.
Yeah.
And of course, there were no verse breaks or chapter breaks. It was all just a bunch of letters, to be honest with you. Very difficult to read.
Yes. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. The cypresses rejoice at you. The cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were laid low, no woodcutter comes up against us. We kind of talked about this before when we dealt with Ezekiel 32, which I want to get to, which probably won't happen this week.
Probably not, but these aren't actually trees.
No. Whenever you see a reference to Lebanon and the trees of Lebanon, we saw that in Ezekiel 31 and 32, where the cedars are clearly representing supernatural entities because those trees were cast down to Sheol, and God says, I covered them over with the deep, with the Tehom. Verse 9. Now, this is this entity being thrown out of God's garden and off his mountain. Sheol beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come. It rouses the shades. That's Rephaim. It rouses the Rephaim to greet you. All who were leaders of the earth, it rouses from their thrones all who were kings of the nations. This is a reference to the giants of the ancient world, and we see that in the Septuagint. Hades below was embittered after meeting you, all the giants who ruled the land. So it's clear that we're dealing with the Nephilim of the pre-flood world.
We would call them demons today.
Right.
So Jesus did battle with giants.
The giants. That's correct. This is one of the reasons that I argue in the second coming of Saturn that this entity, Hillel ben Shachar, translated by Origen and then Jerome, who translated the Bible into Latin as Lucifer, light bringer, that Lucifer is not Satan. Because when you see read the few mentions in the Old Testament of Satan, first of all, it's a title, the Satan,
Yes.
but he's never connected to the netherworld. And in fact, there's some good research been done on this by our friend David W. Lowe in his book,
good.
Deconstructing Lucifer. He's been on this program, by the way. We discussed his book, Earthquake Resurrection, sometime back. You can find those in the archives. He shows how the concept of Satan developed in the centuries after the resurrection of Jesus. I mean, Jews to this day do not consider Satan the Lord of hell. That was an idea that was developed after the Bible had been written. So,
and it's become such a part of our
Right.
Christian lexicon. The ideas it's drummed into you from the time you're a child.
we take it as a given. Isaiah 14 and the parallel chapter in Ezekiel 28. Oh, sure, that's about Satan because who's the one who's cast out of Eden? Well, yeah, but we also know from 2 Peter and Jude that there are sinful angels. Well, who were they? And presumably they were also cast out of Eden.
Exactly.
So this is one of the reasons. Again, Satan, nowhere in the Bible connected to the netherworld, not even in the New Testament. That's an idea developed by the early church theologians by, putting verses together that are not connected or were not connected by Jewish theologians.
Now, it may be possible that he can go in back and
Sure.
forth, being a spirit entity, just like the Rephaim, the spirits of the giants. They go back and forth.
Right.
They can't go to Tartarus, I don't think.
You're probably
I think
right.
Tartarus is probably cut off
Probably.
for now. Sadly, it's going to open up one day.
Right.
And the judgment will fall.
Mhm. There's the connection between Jesus seeing Satan fall from heaven like lightning and the verse in Revelation 12 with the seven-headed red dragon, who's Satan, who is thrown down to earth. But again, that connection was not made until a couple of centuries after the resurrection of Jesus. It's not explicit that in Revelation 12 it's referring to Jesus seeing, Satan thrown from heaven like lightning. It may be, but it's not explicit in Scripture.
Can I ask you a question really quickly? Because you were mentioning how the seven-headed red dragon.
Mm-hmm.
There's a seven-headed dragon in the book of Revelation.
Right.
I just want to make sure we're not the same entity, right?
No, we've got two separate seven-headed creatures, the seven-headed red dragon that is Satan in Revelation 12, and then you've got the seven-headed chimera that comes out of the sea at the beginning of Revelation 13. And that's the creature that most believe is the Antichrist. We accept that. We also believe, though, that is the spirit of Leviathan.
Yeah.
Because he's emerging from the sea, which represents chaos, primordial chaos, the abyss.
Yes. Those seven heads may actually be sort of like my finger puppets that I talk about all the time.
Yeah.
Where you'll have one entity, multiple appearances in our material space. They're not separate entities. They're all in the same hand.
Right. Yeah. Which is how you can get one entity, as we discussed last week with Inanna being Artemis, but also Athena, but also perhaps
and she's
Cybele
possibly even male aspects.
Well, yes, she definitely had male aspects.
Yes.
Among the Canaanites, she was not only Astarte, she was Athtar, the male war god. So,
and her pronouns are.
Yeah, they, them, like legion. Yes, for they are many.
We'll take a break and then we'll come back and talk more about that, beginning with the red dragon. Hey, guess what month it is? And that's why maybe we're wearing red, white, and blue.
It's July.
It's July, which means not only that, the United States celebrates Independence Day, but also anniversary of something big.
Yes, the 1947 Roswell crash, which occurred over 4th of July weekend.
It did. In fact, in 2017, you and I and Josh Peck all went to Roswell to see exactly what happened and get some expert interviews. And then you wrote a book.
Yes, Josh and I wrote the book, The Day the Earth Stands Still, about the phenomenon, because for many people, the UFO phenomenon is not about figuring out how we can travel to the stars. It is really a religion, answering the big questions of life. Why are we here? Where did we come from? What happens when we die?
And it is back in the news. So that is the main reason we've decided to bring back a special from last summer. If you get this book, and you will get these two practically free.
Yes.
Because the whole package, you're going to save $30.
Yes.
It's only $35 for all three. You get the book The two Friday crazy,
Best of deals is 14 hours of video on the between the two Best of Friday. And we do address the UFO phenomenon on some of these episodes. $35 plus shipping and handling, available now only at our store online, gilberthouse.org/store. Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and as we talked about in the break, we've got specials at gilberthouse.org/store. They change monthly. We want you to go. If you're watching this in the archives, go there now and see exactly what we've got on special. And while you're at gilberthouse.org, go to /donate. Because if you have the wherewithal to help out with the barn project, great.
Yeah.
But please pray for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got this building that came with the property. We didn't look for a property with the building. That's why it's been basically just a parking garage for our yard tractor for 8 years. But
not now.
Yeah, the Lord has made it clear that let's do more video, because that seems to reach more people than the written word. And it's just, we've got every bedroom in our house except the one we sleep in is already taken. This is,
I've thought about putting equipment in there, but in fact, this camera is practically in there.
Yeah.
But go there and see what's going on. We change it all the time. And again, download the app, because all of our stuff's there. So, 7-headed dragon.
Yes, this is in Revelation 12. It is Lucifer as Jerome and Origen would have called him, Satan, very clearly in Revelation chapter 12. 7 heads, 10 horns, on his head 10 diadems. We talked about that in a previous study, but it's clear because he is specifically identified as Satan, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. Beginning of chapter 13, the beast rising out of the sea, 10 horns, 7 heads with 10 diadems on its horns.
Oh, different
and
description.
Blasphemous names on its heads, right. And it's curious because we're seeing, 10 horns and 7 heads on both of these entities, but why does Satan have 7 diadems and the beast, the Antichrist, Leviathan, has 10 diadems? And again, the diadem is a crown of royalty as compared to the crown on the rider on the white horse in Revelation 6, a Stephanos, a crown of victory. It's different. We see the rider on the white horse in Revelation 19, which is Jesus, the Messiah, with many diadems, a multitude of diadems, showing that he is of royalty, but way more than either of these. It may suggest their origin in Eden. They were among the stars of God at creation who sang for joy, according to Job. But we need to distinguish between these 7-headed entities. But it was really interesting that back in ancient Mesopotamia, going back at least 2,500 years before Jesus, there are inscriptions that show a war god, Ninurta particularly, doing battle with a 7-headed chaos dragon. And it looks weird. It's like the body of a big cat with the serpentine heads and necks and whatever. Interestingly, in this little inscription, one of them appears to have suffered a mortal head wound, like is prophesied of
that's right.
2,500 years before the birth of Jesus. But that entity was referred to in Akkadian as Bashmu, which was their form of the name Bashan, the name of the kingdom of Og of Bashan.
The serpent.
The serpent.
When you hear serpent, don't necessarily think snake. Think dragon.
Yeah. Or snake dragon, even more specifically.
Yeah.
But
and in fact, you see a lot of imagery of horned serpents.
In the ancient world,
in the ancient world, and even in Hernunos, who is supposed to be a Celtic version of that same deity.
Yeah. So this was a very ancient concept. I mean, older at the time of Jesus than John's revelation is to us today. And would have been familiar to John's readers at the time, even though the depiction of this as a dragon seems weird to us. That doesn't look like the Hydra that Hercules fought. Well, no, it doesn't, but this is how dragons were depicted in ancient Mesopotamia. So that is who is in view when we're looking at Satan, that ancient serpent, which again gets to the reason why I don't think that Satan is the one who's described in Isaiah 14 or Ezekiel 28.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're dealing with an entity who was cast down to Sheol, but in fact, we'll see a little further down here that not just in Sheol, but the far reaches of the pit, which connects Isaiah 14 to Ezekiel 32. And we'll get to that in just a minute.
Boy, lots of little connections.
Yes. It's, well, believe it or not, the Bible is all connected.
One author.
Yes.
All throughout.
Right.
Telling the same story in different ways.
So Isaiah 14, back to verse 9, Sheol beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come. It rouses the Rephaim to greet you. These were the spirits of the underworld. In fact, in Canaanite, they were referred to as the Elohim Eretz. Those aren't the words in the Canaanite language, but they're close, very similar. Essentially means gods of the underworld. All who were leaders of the earth, it raises from their thrones all who were kings of the nations. All of them will answer and say to you, you too have become as weak as we. You have become like us. Your pomp is brought down to Sheol, the sound of your harps. Maggots are laid as a bed beneath you, and worms are your covers. Then we get to the quote you're very familiar with, the verse you're very familiar with. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn, O Helen ben Shachar, or O Enlil, son of the morning, which I wonder if that is an epithet or a nickname applied to this entity because he was one of the stars who sang for joy when God created the universe.
I think that's entirely possible. And we see these names. Names for an entity could be thousands. You just don't know because it describes, essentially the name has your history within it. The things you've done, the things you've seen, your powers, they are inherent within your name.
Right.
And so that's why you'll have epithets, which are part of a name.
Right. Well, I think that's very telling here. How you are fallen from heaven, O Enlil, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. Above the stars of God, I will set my throne on high.
Well, that's quite a goal.
Yeah, and what's interesting here, though, is that the verse in Hebrew could also mean the stars of El, because the word there instead of God is El, and El, yes, it is the generic form for the word God in Hebrew, but it is also the name of the Canaanite form of Enlil or Assur.
Yes, I do think, my personal opinion, I think it's referring to actually to the Creator.
Yeah.
Because we get in verse 14, I will be like the Most High.
Right. So the stars of God, the stars of El, whichever, I will make myself higher than the angels.
I'm climbing up over everybody and taking over this territory.
I'm number one, is what he's saying. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the Mount of Assembly. And that's the verse there from which scholar back in the 1930s, Charles A. Torrey, said, this is the origin of the word Armageddon. Mount of Assembly is Har Moed.
Yes.
And that is the goal, that is the objective of this rebellion, of Satan's rebellion, of this entity's rebellion, of Inanna's rebellion, the woman who rides the beast.
Yes.
They want to take God's Mount of Assembly or Mount of the Congregation.
Yes. It's a goal all of them seem to have.
Yes.
In fact, Satan would love to put a human on that throne that he can control.
The Antichrist.
Yes. Well, he tried to put Christ on the throne and Christ said no.
Yeah, offered him the job. Just bow the knee to me. Yeah.
No, I won't be doing that.
I will sit on the Mount of Assembly, the Har Moed, in the far reaches of the north.
Now that's confusing.
Yeah, because the Mount of Assembly, God's Mount of Assembly, is not in the far reaches of the north.
No.
You friends in the UK who are in the north, it does not refer to, the area around Hadrian's Wall. But there are some Bible translators who recognize here the remote parts of Zephon. Zephon, that's a note in the ESV, because Mount Zephon, which is the origin of the idea that word Zephon means north in Hebrew, because it's the only Semitic language from the ancient world where that word or one like it means north. In the related languages, the word is Simal. Mount Zephon was where Baal's palace was located.
So he's taking over multiple assemblies. He's taking over the entire earth.
Right. Apparently, this entity wants to set himself up on the mountain that was sacred to Baal, who is Satan.
Well, read verse 14 because there's an interesting aspect.
I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. By the way, I also want to point out very quickly that the phrase translated far reaches of the north is the uttermost north in Ezekiel 38 and 39. It refers to Mount Zaphon, the sacred mountain of Baal. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High.
Both of those those two phrases are parallel with one another. Descriptions of the Most High include the cloud rider.
Yes, storm god language.
I'm going to climb up to his throne, his Mount of Assembly. I'm going to sit at the peak of that. I'm running the show.
Yeah, which suggests some political tension between members of the fallen realm.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm in Sheol right now, but I am going to take your mountain, Baal, Satan.
Well, here's what I love. Currently in the news, now this is old news to you, but currently in the news, Elon Musk has challenged Mark Zuckerberg via Instagram and Twitter. They're going back and forth against each other. And they have decided as of today, while we're recording this, that they're going to have an actual physical fight in Las Vegas.
Oh.
Now, I'd almost pay to go see that. But my comment on Twitter was, is this virtual or real? Apparently, they're planning to actually do this.
Oh, boy.
This is the kind of thing that this entity is challenging the Almighty to. Come on, meet me in Jerusalem and we'll go at it. And I'm going to beat you.
Right.
Because you tricked me before.
Yeah.
I'm only down here because you tricked me.
In other words, Shemiyaza, or the destroyer Apollyon Abaddon, is in Tartarus because the adversary, Satan, tricked him.
And here's the great part. The Lord says, okay, all right, I'll meet you. You got 5 months. You got 5 months to take me down.
Yeah. And that's obviously not going to happen.
No.
One final verse here, because I want to get to this real quick. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. And again, that phrase, far reaches, as in far reaches of the north, is Yarkate. Far reaches of the pit, Yarkate Bor. We see that phrase in Ezekiel 32, referring to Assur. Assur is in the far reaches of the pit, Yarkate Bor, which I think is, and I'm alone in this, as far as I know. I've not seen Hebrew or Bible scholars make this claim, but I think this distinguishes it from Sheol itself, where human dead are. But the far reaches of the pit, I think, is the Hebrew way of referencing the abyss, the bottomless pit, or Tartarus in the Greek.
Septuagint seems to go there, even the foundations of the earth, the very center, journey to the center of the earth.
Yeah. There's no specific reference to the bottomless pit or the abyss in the Old Testament, but I think this is a reference to it. And again, this connects to Assur or Enlil or El or Molech or Shemiyaza or Abaddon, Apollyon, the putting them in the bottomless pit.
That is a lot.
We're going to pick this up next week because we've got more to do, especially when it comes to the prophesied destruction of this entity, his minions, and the Nephilim / Rephaim.
Yay.
Ah, man, so much in Unraveling Revelation.
Unraveling Revelation is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries.